So welcome
decades.
everyone.
I've had name
We're
dilution.
actually streaming to Facebook tonight, and we've got some fabulous VCs here and a great moderator. David's been a moderator for us quite a bit, and he's done some fantastic work. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and you're going to take it over and let the VCs introduce themselves.
Thank you very much.
Before I do that, though, I'd also just like to give credit to Startup Basecamp and thank them for the use of the venue, and I know that they're a startup hotel and that startups can actually stay here as well. So thanks. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and you're here on a great night. Please come sit down if you haven't. Thank you to the streaming video viewing audience. We want you to participate as much as possible. You are very lucky because we have two great panelists here. To my immediate right is kind of you don't like the term legend because it makes you feel old, but you've been in the industry for many, many decades, and I've been reading about you. So when I found out that I was going to be moderating this panel with you on it, I was like, wow, this is like incredible. If you don't know Ann Winblad, we're not going to go through the whole litany right now, but just Google her. She's got a long, long history, but she's the co-founder, managing director of Hummer Winblad Venture Partners. So it is her creation, and you've been in this VC business for a very, very long time.
28 years.
Yeah, very, very long. And next to Anne is someone who's younger, looking to be a legend as well, is Jake Chapman, and he is also a founder of his own capital firm, Gelt Venture Capital as well. So the topic here, and also I should mention that this is an open discussion, so don't feel that there's a time that you have to wait to chat. Please just pipe up at any time. And all I ask is if you have a question or any comment, please be on the microphone so the people who are watching streaming can actually hear you. Because if you're not on the microphone, it's just going to be this period of dead silence, and nobody over there is going to enjoy that. So let me just, the topic is questions VCs ask, and this is very similar to a topic we had last month when we were here as well. But I will just sort of ask, you've been in this industry for so long. Is there a question you're asking from day one to today, and it's the same question, or has that changed?
Well, first of all, if you're in a meeting with a VC and they don't ask any questions, that's a bad thing. That means meeting over, no interest. So we ask a lot of questions. The typical question that we'll ask founders is, how did you meet each other? How did you come together as founders? We want to know a lot about you, the chemistry of the founders, how you think, what kind of, are you a good person? Because we're going to hand you the money, and you're going to run with it and hopefully build a great company. So that's usually the first question if we're very interested.
So let me pause you right there on the how do you meet each other. What do you get out of how did you meet each other? Like it's just kind of a nice softball question, it sounds like to me, but is there any intrinsic value you get from that?
Absolutely. We had a recent big IPO in a company called MuleSoft, and I met the founders. The core founder, the visionary guy, was in Malta, and there were 4 other developers, 2 in Germany and 2 in Buenos Aires, and then there was this guy in San Francisco. And the guy in San Francisco was the anointed CEO. So we meet this visionary guy, and he's got this big idea about how integration is going to work in the future. And here's this guy. We want to know, did he bolt that guy on just to come in with the CEO? We asked, how did you decide who would be the CEO? And over time we realized that it was great he bolted this guy on, but he was not, over a very short period of time, a CEO. He was just brought in to get the company incorporated in the US because the founder stayed in Malta until recently.
So he was just really kind of a mechanic. It didn't seem like he had sort of intrinsic leadership value. He was just getting everything set up.
He actually did a really great job of getting the company marketed early on, but he was not a long-term partner. There was not a deep relationship, and that evolved to show itself out. And we had our eyes on that. Is what's going to happen in this relationship? The main visionaries in Malta there's this guy here. They're both great presenters. They both are really smart. But how did this really happen? And it really was because this founder was told, you should incorporate in the US, go find someone. You can't start a company without a CEO, go find someone. He found a good guy, but not a guy that over time could grow the company and continue to lead it. And over time was not that long a period of time. So we learned a lot about that. What about these guys in Buenos Aires?
So did you know that early on? Did that scare you? Obviously not, since you invested in them. But were you then working like, okay, we need a more permanent plan for a CEO?
No. We are always hopeful that sometimes we get a couple engineers in and we say, hey, who's running this? And they go, well, no one. We hope you help us find a CEO. We're okay with that. Or somebody says, well, we flipped a coin and I got to be the CEO, or we're co-CEOs. That's a no. That's okay. That means you don't have one. So
I worked at a company that had a shared CEO for 2 different offices.
Yeah, you agree with that too?
That never flies.
Yeah.
And every time I see that, like in an email pitch, I just email back and I say, one word of advice,
Right.
one of you become the CEO.
Yeah.
So why is it, okay, so why is that dangerous? Why is a co-CEO dangerous?
Yeah, so I'll echo Ann, like first set of questions, all about the team and who the people are. The reason the co-CEO situation is dangerous is because it means they haven't had the uncomfortable conversation yet, or they had it and they couldn't come to a decision. So either neither of them can effectively be the CEO, or they both really want to be the CEO. And both situations are terrible and are only going to lead to problems in the future, right? And so I'd rather them hash that out before we get involved. Or maybe we can help them sort of talk it through, but
Have you invested in a company that had co-CEOs?
No.
never.
Okay. Or did they present themselves as co-CEOs, go, you figure that out and then we'll talk again, kind of a thing?
I think there are 2 things. One is the learning here is it's going to be a real red flag if you come in with co-CEOs, and you maybe won't even get in the door saying that with your early pitch to us. Number 2, don't bolt people on to try to have a management team. And you are who you are. I mean, in the case of MuleSoft, 5 people. In the case of another board I'm on, there were 2 people. Neither one was the CEO, and they said, can you help us find one? And we don't bolt one on either. We say, well, you're going to have to run this maybe for months. Well, we all work together to help you find a CEO.
The Harvard Business School professor, I think his name is Noam Wasserman, wrote a book called The Founder's Dilemma. Great book, I highly recommend it if you want just the numbers behind venture-backed companies. But he looked at, I think it was 1,000 companies in his sample, and of the 1,000 companies, of the failures in that 1,000 company pool, 65% of them had the co-founders broke up, and that was a major precipitating cause to the failure of the company. And so even if only half of that 65% is what exactly led to the demise of the company, that's a major
Okay,
impact.
so that's an interesting thing, because if anyone listens to the startup podcast, there was a couple episodes where they approached this, where they had like a guy who was like a therapist for startups, and this was the specific thing about conflicts between founders, that he goes, this is why they break up, why there's problems. Is there something that you see early on that goes, oh, this is a really healthy relationship among the founders, or this is a not healthy relationship among the founders?
Well, it's stressful to build a company from scratch. I had done this and had 3 co-founders. And I'd known them. We all left the Federal Reserve Bank in Minneapolis and started a software company. And they were 3 really talented developers. I'd only been out of college a year. They'd all been out of college for 3 years. So they seemed very wise to me, having those 3 years on me. And, a lot can go wrong. Even though you are visionaries, you can't predict the future. And, you don't know a lot of stuff. So there are tense moments. And somebody around the team has to look like they can lead you through those. We're back to the leadership again.
So you're looking for one person, essentially the Captain Kirk, who can handle anything under pressure, who can deal with the most adverse moments and still keep his or her head up.
And someone who can actually keep their eye on the prize while getting a lot of stuff done. Because a lot of companies just die on the hamster wheel. They're just doing stuff,
Yeah.
and they forgot what the prize was. So I would say that the takeaway from this is that the quality of your CEO makes or breaks the company. And our job as board members on companies our primary job is to hire or fire the CEO, to be looking at that one leader and saying, are they actually doing a great job? In the case of MuleSoft, when we knew we had to go find a CEO, we interviewed candidates for 7 months, worked very closely with the founder, and found a fantastic CEO who's taken that company from dozens of people to 1,100 to a $3 billion market cap.
Yes, you have a question.
Yes, I have a question. When you talk about the co-CEO situation, considering the success that a firm like Atlassian has had, would you not advise these entrepreneurs to pursue that strategy? Because it almost makes it sound like co-CEO is a no off the bat. Yet there is a very successful company under that. Now, they did not take any money early on, so they were in a different situation, but I just would like to hear your thoughts on that.
I don't know those two founders very well, but certainly the results are in. It's a company with almost a $10 billion market cap in an evolving area called DevOps, so they kept their eyes on the prize too. They were in Australia, not here. There was a lot of challenges for them finding leadership here during the period of time that they weren't taking money. They had a huge, wide open market opportunity going for them, which is number 2. They were dealing with, Jira was competing against some really old stuff, that owned the markets, Microsoft Project, stuff at IBM. And they ran a truck through that. And really delighted developers, which they've continued to do. So I don't know the situation there. I don't know if they even had a board of directors during that.
But have you, the two of you, seen in your experience? I mean, thank you for bringing up that example. It's a great example.
It's a great company
because
too.
The thing is, my feeling in like everything I've seen, for every rule there is in the marketplace,
There's an
you
exception.
can find an exception that not only is an exception, but capitalize on the thing that you tell everyone not to do, kind of a thing. So those cases always exist. But we couldn't list a litany of them, but I mean, that's a great example.
Yeah, and if you look at Facebook, clearly Mark Zuckerberg is the CEO, but Sheryl has a big role there, that she was not given the title co-CEO, and that's more typical. But it's hard to know without being inside the tent of Atlassian.
Thank you.
So I want to go back to the Jake. Still answer the question of is there signs that you see among the founders that makes you think, oh, this is a healthy relationship or not a healthy relationship? Because talking about like the breakups.
Yeah, I mean it's really hard in 1 meeting, 2 meetings, 3 meetings. So usually my first contact with the founder is at an event or it's like an introductory phone call. And then I have like a soft meeting over coffee. And then it's maybe a meeting at their office or a meeting at our office. And then I like to do it over drinks, which is a little bit more controversial these days, or over dinner, or something like a social situation.
Like a human situation.
A human situation, I know. To see how they react in normal everyday life and hear what their family life is like, what they do on the weekends. But
so you have a very sort of strict dynamic. Do you feel that you get something different out of all those venues that you just described?
I think so, for sure. I mean, once you've made it to the let's have dinner stage, you've met with them a bunch of times, you've built a rapport. The dinner, maybe talk about the business a little bit, but it's really a much more social situation. So you see how the person is in a social situation.
Here's the interesting thing, because everyone sort of usually does well at dinner. Have you ever ended something after a dinner?
Yes.
That sounds like a good story. I haven't. I mean, I've not invested in a company after the dinner, but not because of what happened. And most of those people have stayed friends and contacts afterwards.
Okay.
But yeah.
What's your story?
Well, I can't even tell the story. It's so absurd. But
Well, no, then that's why we obviously don't reveal who was involved. Just give us the vagaries of what went down.
I did usually when we had the dinners early on in our fund, because John Hummer and I would do the dinners together. Because we made it like you weren't being interviewed by one person, but there were two of us and usually two or three of others. And this one, the CEO of the company, I already felt really positive about, but I had actually not met the founder, the technical founder, who is the major shareholder in the company. He had more shares than the other guy. And I knew the meeting was going to get off at the wrong track when he brought this woman along. And I thought, well, maybe that's his wife. That's great too. He feels really comfortable bringing his wife. And I said, oh, it's great to meet you. And I thought, well, how do I know who this is? What do I say? Are you the girlfriend? Are you the wife? Whatever. And I said, well, how long have you known each other? And she said, well, we just met 2 hours ago. And that's as far as I'm going to take the story.
Our imaginations can all run wild with that.
But back to this.
But that's just right there. That screams poor judgment. And
exactly. You think so? The other thing in these meetings is that we say that every entrepreneur, if you're fortunate enough that you can choose who your investor are, especially your first investor, because it's a big step in company building to let an outsider take shares in your company, and you should feel comfortable with us as well. It should be not just a one-way street that, okay, we'll vote for you. Well, how about you? Because we're going to be working with you if you're very successful for many years, and so it's a good thing for you, to really sort of, if you feel this going down the path, to say, I'd love to have a cup of coffee and just talk a little bit more, and I think that's really, really great. Not everybody has a chance to choose between developers, so you can either choose one or nothing, but that's also a really important choice.
Yeah.
So one thing we chatted earlier, Jake and I, about was a whole question of the big word of involvement. And I know all sort of VCs sort of run sort of a large spectrum, but no involvement is never the case, as I understand. VC just acts like a bank. So where do you lie on the quote involvement spectrum? And I will just sort of throw that word out there and have you each define it from your viewpoint.
So I'll start off with the diatribe that I started with you earlier or last week, which is that every VC firm, especially these days, recognizes that money is a commodity and the best deals have multiple investors chasing them. And so that means that we need to differentiate ourselves in some way. And so every VC firm says, we are value add, we're right there beside you, we're working hard every day to make you a success. Every founder also tells their VCs, we want really involved investors who are going to be there side by side working with us every day, because they realize that no VC wants to hear, give me the check and then get lost, and I'll tell you if we have an IPO. And so there's this really interesting dynamic.
Wouldn't that be great?
If they all ended that way, it'd be great. Yeah. So there's this really interesting dynamic where all the VCs say, we're going to be super value add and really involved. And all the founders are saying, we really want you to be value add and really involved. But both parties there's a spectrum on both ends, and they're lying to each other. And the only way you find out what that relationship really looks like is after you write the check, and then all the pretenses go out the window.
So is there something you and the startups can sort of start asking to sort of better define that?
It's really interesting to me how little due diligence most entrepreneurs do on the venture investors. Everybody we've invested in is on our website. And if I was going to have, me or Jay on your board, I'd really want to know, hey, how do they behave as investors? How does the firm work? Is this the right partner in the firm that I should be working with? By just calling up some of the former investments and saying, hey, we're contemplating, accepting a term sheet from these guys, or girls, what are they like?
Does anyone do that?
A few people do, but rarely, and it just seems something you should do.
Super rare.
We do tons of due diligence on you. We are doing checks on you right and left that you don't know about.
Are you
So
doing criminal background checks?
my husband is a private investigator, so that's really easy for me.
Okay, awesome.
But you know, I think from the standpoint of the role of the investor, you don't want zero involvement. And in fact, you know, for venture firms who do a lot of investment, there are some companies that all of a sudden find themselves where the venture investor is not showing up at the board meeting. You know, you're just kind of on your own. That means that you are now in the orphan state. And that's not a state you want to be in, the left alone state. The state you also don't want to be in is the venture investor finding a better strategy for you. Because we are not there every day. We're not running the company. If the strategy is not working, we might say, hey, at the board meeting, you know, you've been here 3 months in a row and you keep saying this is going to happen, but it's not. Let's take a look at some of our assumptions. Our assumptions about the value of our product, the assumption about the pricing of our product, the assumptions about our go-to-market strategy, the assumptions of our key strategic assumptions. Are they still true? Oh, wait, one is false. Well, how are you going to adjust the business then? But you know, we can't be in the role of the Uber CEO and take the role of saying, well, last night we were thinking about it and we've got a better thing for you to do, pivot this way. And because it doesn't work, we can't really run the companies. And sometimes you find this early on where people are making the transition from entrepreneur to investor. It's like changing from player to coach. You know, you cannot, you know, if you saw the coach of the Warriors suddenly run out there and start dribbling the ball, that's, you know, he actually might be good at this, we don't know, but that's not within the game plan. And that's what you really want. You want a really great coach on the sidelines, someone that you are talking to only on timeouts, someone who is watching the whole team, has a bigger view of the playing field because they have a portfolio of companies, and that they're a great coach versus actually being a player coach. You don't want a player coach.
Yeah. It is hard before the investment, though, to figure out exactly how these dynamics are going to play out. You can do your diligence. I think that's really important. But sometimes things change to mid-process. So, for instance, your investor, the person who put money into your company, could leave the firm. And then the firm puts someone else on your board. And maybe that's just an associate or a principal or someone who doesn't really care about your company. Or it could be an investor at a large firm like an Andreessen or something that has many investors. And maybe that investor has made 4 investments and 3 of them had failed and you're the last one. And now all of a sudden their entire career and track record depends on you having an IPO and you alone. And so that's when you might see especially a tendency towards the coach trying to become the player.
Right, which usually does not work.
Which is probably not going to work.
Is there anything that a startup can do to sort of navigate themselves, protect themselves, maybe create a term sheet that sort of dictates what does and doesn't happen?
Well, you're the retired lawyer, so in you is a lawyer somewhere from a great firm, Cooley, whom we use often. But there are a couple things. If you feel nervous about the firm and you feel like only one person in the firm can serve as your director, especially in follow-on rounds, you can name that person and say this, the director spot for your X venture fund is for Susie or Bob. And, you can't move that around.
And again, what if that person leaves
But then you have control over choosing versus the normal term sheet, which says Venture X is entitled to a board seat. That means the firm can name it. And if you have a great relationship, they're going to, I was on a board where one of the investors, senior partners, and he wasn't that senior, he was 46 years old, I think, or maybe even less, 45, died suddenly. He wasn't sick or anything, so suddenly now there's this just open spot where we're still mushing around people because everybody was busy. So that unfortunately was something that the firm wasn't doing anything bad. It was just an unfortunate circumstance. But even in that case, that company has no choice of who's put in the board. They can say, hey, so-and-so is probably not the right person. But ultimately, it's back to what Jay is saying, that who has bandwidth, who wants to fly there, who likes the space, and it might narrow down to a straw.
I mean, I think I guess I'm the jaded lawyer, because my opinion is that legal documents set the expectations, but that at the end of the day, like, relationships are all that really dictate what's going to happen.
By the way, what kind of law did you practice prior to this?
I work for venture funds.
Okay.
Yeah. So specifically this kind of stuff. So I mean, you can agree to whatever term you want to agree to. At the end of the day, it's market dynamics and your relationships that dictate what's going to happen. So, we as venture investors, we always negotiate pro rata rights to invest in your next round and maintain our position. But sometimes a very large brand name firm might come in and want to take the entire round and tell the founder, hey, your prior investors who have pro rata rights, we'll invest, but only if they waive their rights. And then what do? I, as an earlier investor, probably want the big brand name firm in because it helps my position, but I want to keep reinvesting, right? And so I have to rely, in that case, on my relationship with the founder to go back to the other firm and negotiate on my behalf.
Say, no, we're not going to wipe these guys out. These guys should be, they've got the money, let them keep their peace. But this goes back to Venture 101 as well, is, I remember, I did not take venture capital in my successful software company, so I'd never seen a term sheet before before I became a venture capitalist. And then these crazy documents which are not written in any technical vernacular at all. So, be sure to find a trusted lawyer or reformed lawyer to just sit down with you and take you through the vernacular of a term sheet. Because if you've never seen one before, they're pretty arcane documents.
They are. And don't take anything I say as legal advice, or, and I'm certainly not saying
Just
you
how to
shouldn't have a
understand.
lawyer.
Did you say that when you were a lawyer? Don't take anything I say as legal.
I actually used to say that all the time.
All right, so you're sitting down with a startup. Are there questions, like you did make the mention of, I would love it if they would actually do the due diligence on us and, talk to all the companies we've invested in. But when you're sitting down in any of these meetings, are there questions you wish they would be asking that they're not asking, that you think is critical?
That they're asking us?
Yeah.
Or we're asking them?
Well, no, or is it just sort of the lack of asking? They just think, oh, they're supposed to be doing all the asking of the questions.
Well, I think we got to be careful to suddenly have all the questions be asked about us while we're in the meeting, because we do, if we're super interested in the company, you'll hear us say, are there any questions you'd like to ask us? Let's open up the dialogue.
That's a good sign.
That's a good sign. That.
But also, is it a bad sign if you've been asking a lot of questions and they've never asked you a question? Is it just more, I would think it's more of their just greenness. They just don't know how to behave.
Well, I think the one question that you would want to ask when the meeting's ended is, there are 3 questions. One is, do you have any immediate feedback from us after hearing our presentation that you'd like to share with us? Number 2, what's the process? What happens next? What is the process of your firm? Because every firm has sort of a different process, slightly the same, but it might be different. And basically, what are the next steps? Or is there anything else that we can provide you that we've not provided in the presentation? So those 3, I think, are good ones.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think my favorite question for founders to ask me at the end of a presentation is, after hearing what we've just told you, what are your biggest hesitations about investing in us? Because usually it takes me a little bit of time to think through everything I've heard, but at the end of a good pitch, I've got 2 or 3 things that are standing out as red flags. It's a team issue or
that's
market.
That's a good question right there. 2 or 3 things stand out. Are there any red flags that seem to be consistent, or is it always, it's different across the board?
I think one of the most common red flags is just the market issue. So I think almost everybody sizes their market incorrectly, and so we go off and try and size it ourselves and figure out how big it really is.
Is it just they're not pulling enough data, not pulling the right data?
Well, and when you're doing seed and A round, how do you size markets?
Yeah.
You know, we're leaning into the future here. When you're doing a C round, it's pretty easy to size markets. So, you know, we're all trying to figure out how do we scope the opportunity field more than giving a number to it. You know, and because it's really hard to put a number on this. But
So wouldn't maybe the and I'm just sort of projecting here, maybe the thing at sort of at very, very early rounds, maybe showing at different milestones, if we do this, we'll be able to discover this about the market. If we do this, we'll be able to discover that about the market.
No, not so much that. Let's go back to the Atlassian example, because it would have been fun to have a pitch from them early on. So I can imagine that if they'd given an early stage pitch, they would have said, look, you know, the number of software developers is not decreasing, it's increasing. You know, the rapid tooling of these developers, the emergence of DevOps, which, you know, someone first used that term in 2008, so that was 9 years ago. You know, and also let's look at what tools are out there. Yeah, Microsoft Project, which was an acquired company in what, you know, 85. You've got, you know, ClearCase or something, or the rational stuff piled over there at IBM. You know, this is a market that really, you know, here are the dynamics of this market. There are X millions of developers. You know, there hasn't been new tooling for them for a long time because the incumbents got lazy, realistically. That would have told me, wow, I should look at this market, this is really true. Especially, you know, if they were around the room and at our office and they'd say that, you know, 3 of the 5 partners in the room at that time had all been software developers before. That's what I mean by scoping and sizing the market. Not diving into functions and features of product. You know, you're not trying to sell me the product, you're trying to sell me a business potential. That is the big difference. We get a lot of pitches in there, you know, at least the first round pitches where we'll do one-on-ones, where it's like, I can tell you everything about that product, but I can't tell you anything about the potential for this to be a company. So don't try to sell me a product, try to sell me a business opportunity, and then have me can you tell me a little bit more about how that product works? You know, let's talk about the functions and features here. But you're proud of your baby, and your baby is the first product you're going to bring to market.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. One of my favorite questions to ask is, if we assume that everything goes right in the business you want to build, what does your business look like in 10 or 20 years? Like, give me the fully optimistic, grand view, like your dream business. Because I think a lot of people are worried about sharing that dream with investors because they're going to seem unfocused or pie in the sky or whatever it is. But that's what we want to invest in. We want to invest in the big dream. And then once you've told me what that dream is and we can sort of dream together about that for a few minutes, then it's like, let's take a step back. How do you actually get to that vision? But I think a lot of founders don't come in wanting to share the big vision. They come in
Just
sharing
want to share
the product.
Yeah, if we look at, you know, the 10 most valuable companies on the planet today, we talked about this earlier, 7 of them are tech companies, but one that isn't is Berkshire Hathaway. And Warren Buffett is the best investor on the planet. He's even stood this test of time with all these fantastic tech companies. But Warren says one thing: the market bats last. Even if you're not a baseball fan, you can imagine the market batting at something. And, you know, we want to know that you've taken the risk of telling someone in the marketplace about this, or that you've been a customer, and which was the case of MuleSoft. Ross Mason was out there working for a consulting company that had to install integration software, Webster, WebLogic, TIBCO, and he kept going home and telling his girlfriend that, you know, this stuff is so awful. It's just, you know, you need a wrench and a tow truck to get this in and out of there. And finally, his girlfriend said, "Well, you know, it's just donkey software," is what he called it. That's why it's called MuleSoft. Finally, his girlfriend said to him, "Why don't you just go write your own version of it? That is something that is more usable, more contemporary, more whatever." So we could see that, you know, he had been in the customer a lot. And his first customers represented that he got it right, and those were not paying customers. But how do we know that it's not just a great technical idea, but the market might actually, as Warren Buffett says, take a whack at it? We funded another company called Hyperion years ago, and that was two guys, Jim and Bob. One guy was a rocket scientist, and Jim was a sales guy. So they came in, and they seemed like great guys, and they said there's going to be this area that we're calling business intelligence. This company went public and was acquired later for $3 billion, a huge success for everybody. But Jim did this great thing. He had a scroll with him. I don't recommend this. And he rolled it out on our conference table. Very theatrical. This usually does not work, by the way. And he goes, this is the name of 500 companies that I've sold these old crummy products to. And you can call any one of them and describe our product and see how they react. And you can use my name because I've met them all. That captured us in the first 5 minutes of that pitch.
Yep.
But you're saying theatrics don't work.
That's
But
impressive.
that was a great theatrical
It
move.
worked perfectly.
So hold it. Let me intrigue. Have you seen theatrical moves? You roll your eyes. You go, because it didn't.
Yeah, the guy, I was telling the story earlier to someone who it was an event like this, and everybody got to give their pitch at the end, one-on-one at a little table that we broke up into sets. And the last guy, and I'm getting a little fatigued, so I'm thinking this better be good. He had no laptop, no anything, just himself. And I said, well, okay, tell me about your company. He goes, I can control networks with brainwaves. And I go, wow, well, I have to say that's the most sensational thing I've heard today. And that really woke me up. And I go, let's get the demo. And he sort of sat there, and then he goes, it's too cloudy tonight to give the demo. I need clearer skies. So
It's fair.
So I do remember the guy. I will not name him. It was theatrical, but I had no interest in what else he was going to tell me.
Live demos are hard.
They are. And if they're early stage companies and it's really early, they break. So that we actually like that, because we see how the team operates under stress.
Let me ask so it's interesting. I was just over at Berkeley covering a hackathon, Cal Hacks, the hackathon. And most of the people hacking there were, Berkeley students. They're kind of living and breathing this atmosphere. But I met this one woman who was from Kansas City, and she's just eager to be out here. And she had no contacts, but she worked her way within, just the people there. This is something I hear a lot for the people who just haven't been out here long enough, or literally coming from another country, and they're like, well, I don't know Ann Winblad, I don't know Jake. I would love to know them, I'd love them to care about me. And usually everything comes through some kind of introduction, and I don't want to corner them at an event to make them feel, standoffish. So what is the best way to build a relationship? Either I am at the stage of talking to you, or I'm not, but I just know that 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, I do want to talk with you. What's the way you would like to have a relationship built, so that when the person does come to you, you're extremely receptive?
Yeah, so my opinion is that as investors, part of our job is to make ourselves available to people. That's what I spend probably the majority of my time doing, in terms, at least the new deal sourcing. And so I feel like if you can't get any sort of warm introduction to me or have met me in an event, then you're probably just being, to some degree, a little bit lazy. And so I don't like totally cold emails. That said, I think...
Have you ever responded to one?
I respond to plenty of cold emails, but I don't like them, and I don't think I've ever invested in a company that came from a cold email. Okay. But as an example of what someone can do, and this got a long response from me actually, is someone sent me a cold email for their business. They're building an ad tech company. I've founded an ad tech company in the past. And so they had done enough research to know that I had founded that company. And in their email, they talked about what I had done and how it's relevant to the space that they're in. And they referenced an article I had written in the email to me. And so they spent a lot of time personalizing the outreach to me, even though we had never met. And so I wrote a lengthy response back. I don't invest in ad tech because I founded an ad tech company, and it's a long story. But yeah, but I
Did you
really
steer them
appreciate
in the
that.
right direction to somebody else?
I did.
Okay.
I did. But I mean, look, I'm on Twitter all the time. I've invested in companies where I met people first on Twitter and started having conversations, and then met them at an event and recognized them, and then they sent me their deck, and then we went through the process.
Do you ever get cornered? Because I was talking to other investors and how much they absolutely hate getting cornered and getting immediately pitched to at an event. Does that make you miserable, or are you somewhat receptive to it?
It depends on the context and how much time they're demanding of me. I mean, if it's an event where I'm expecting people to be pitching me and it seems to be reasonable, it's fine. Give me your 30-second pitch. I'll give you some quick feedback. If that extends into a few minutes and I've told you I don't invest in your space and you're still, that gets irritating. But
I'm going to answer this question a different way. I'm not from Silicon Valley. I grew up in Minnesota, went to a small private college, grad and undergrad. So I didn't go to Stanford, Harvard, any of those places. I will say that last year I went to Stanford reunions with my husband, who's a Stanford grad. And I was kind of wandering off on my own, and this guy came up to me and said, I have not seen you since we dated at Stanford. So you become a Stanford grad if you've been here long enough. I said, that's interesting. I've never seen you before. But, I've sort of always felt like an outsider, because I don't have any of the pedigree anyone else has here. And
But you, that's hard to hear from you,
Well,
because
but-
you seem like such a sort of an element of Silicon Valley.
well, that's nice. I've become that. It's like those giant
Well-
redwood trees in Muir Woods. They've been there a long time. But anyway, I don't like to be cornered where when I say, hey, it's great to meet you, are you an enterprise software company? And they say, yeah. And I say, are you looking for an A round or early stage? And they go, yeah. And I said, well, let me remember your name. Let's say that, remind me that we met here briefly, but don't try to regurgitate the whole business, because everybody's waiting in line and you can't. So that's why you feel cornered, because you don't have enough bandwidth.
Right.
So we don't like being cornered because we can't do anything. But I will tell you that, I love getting new ideas over the transom. I love the idea when, I find someone who is not introduced to me by, one of the white shoe law firms in Silicon Valley, are not introduced to me by an existing entrepreneur, because I feel that this is what entrepreneurs are about. That's why I'm on a board in Minneapolis, on a board in DC, on a board in LA, and a board in here.
So you like the non-introduction, so what's the best way to come at you with
yes,
with completely not being introduced?
Just hey, I'm an enterprise software company. I'm looking for a Series A. Here's like a subset of my deck. You don't need to send me the whole deck,
Right.
but just something so I can get my arms around it. And I'll look at it, and I'll usually, if it's really interesting and I've got a lot going on, I'll pass it to one of my other partners who is actively looking at that area deeper than me, even though it's all enterprise software. I might ask a few questions, but I'll always give feedback. Like, hey, I don't think this is for us because of this. We only fund companies where they're incorporated in North America. That includes all of North America. We always start with the Series A. Sometimes seed rounds are recast as perpetual seed rounds. So, a $3 to $5 million seed round is the Series B next, not a Series A. So, we'll give feedback like that, like, hey, this sounds interesting. Can you, have you evolved, the market positioning better? And, I just responded to 5 of those over the transom things right before I came here, because I went home before I came here from work. And I thought, hey, I've got a few minutes. I'm in a quiet spot. I can read these things, and some might be. And I did send one on to one of my partners. I don't think you need a pedigree or an introduction to become a great company. That's just my personal philosophy.
Well, I will say that every time I talk to VCs, they all come from a sort of a very sort of different philosophy and background. So there's definitely not, it's not a one
Universal.
size, yeah,
Most
fits
people
all.
say the following. This is the shtick that everybody says. Look, find someone I know and trust and get them to introduce you. That's like, your Excalibur test. Go pull the sword out of the stone and, bring me the sword. Everybody says that.
Well, I'll say they also want to know that, I get the sense of why you asked it. It's like, if you're serious, you're going to go through the trouble and make this happen.
Yeah,
kind of a
but
thing.
we're in a new era. It's not like, you can't, we have all our email addresses right on our website. No one, sometimes it takes me a few days to get back to you because no one reads my email except me. I don't have like some chief of staff grinding through stuff pretending they're me. Sometimes I'll handwrite my answers while I'm on a plane without Wi-Fi and hand it to my assistant and say, hey, get back to this
You
person,
don't
CC
pull
me.
the computer up and type it and then send it when you land.
Sometimes I do that too. But, if you do that on Macs,
Yeah.
sometimes they never send. It's that bad Outlook Mac software integration.
Well, I dumped Outlook a long time ago. But then you could just pull up some Word documents and write it in there.
Yeah, no,
Whatever.
no. I do that too.
Okay, there you go.
But,
But I'm just
sometimes
surprised at the handwriting.
but
If
sometimes
you
I-
handwrite, just take a photo and send the photo of the
Yeah, I do
handwritten
that too.
document. Oh, do you?
I do
Okay,
that
there
too.
you go.
But you're reading through paper or through pages, and you've got pages over here and whatever. So I do know how to write full sentences.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. So we're, we want to finish at 8 o'clock, right? That's
I want to push back a little bit though.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we're gonna go to
disagree,
questions.
which is
Yeah,
rare
which
on a
is great.
panel.
Yeah.
My email's public. Anyone can get that, and so we do get plenty of cold inbound. But I think the reason I don't like purely cold inbound that isn't tailored to me is because I am on Twitter all the time, and so it's very easy for someone to reach out to me without a pitch and like start talking about the space they're in the sector. And so if someone really is interested in trying to build a long-term relationship with us, it's very easy to do so. And I actually just did an investment in a company where the founder reached out to one of my portfolio companies in an adjacent space and set up a happy hour with the portfolio company, talked to that CEO, and then that CEO forwarded the deck on to me. And so, yes, it does seem like it's making you go pull the sword from the stone, but it's really easy to do. Like you said, all of our companies are on our website.
Yeah. That is and if you're, this is back to, hey, I do think that you'll be better off if you talk to one of our former CEOs and say, hey, I'm getting ready to send a pitch deck to Hummer Winblad. I see that you've been funded. Would you have time to spend 5 minutes looking at it and see, if I'm targeting them right or whatever? But that's just common knowledge. But at the same time, I will say that sometimes that's hard to do. Or you get relegated to the, there's one lawyer that sends me all sorts of junk. And, he's with a white shoe firm and he's a senior guy, but everybody, he doesn't have anything to do anymore. So people all send it to him to get him to send it to venture capitalists. And, it's just like, okay, that's just ill-fated.
Yeah.
Does he get some kind of commission on all this?
Nobody gets commissions.
You hope.
We're not allowed to pay commissions.
Are there any questions from the group here? By the way, any questions from people watching? Any comments, questions? Nothing's coming. Okay. Yes, and anybody here? Yes, yes,
Yeah.
go ahead, Klaus.
Pitch decks.
Hold on, wait till you're on mic.
Pitch decks, are they still required or videos? Like a 60 seconds video?
I would say business plan is not required.
Right.
Pitch deck's required, but we may never even look at it once you're in the room for a meeting. I mean, I like you to send the pitch deck before so I can flip through it via email. There's always this back and forth where a lot of founders don't like to send the pitch deck before the meeting because they want to do the pitch deck live. But then once we're live, I really just want to have a conversation. So there's a little bit of like a gamesmanship there.
Pitch decks is like old school and now it's all video. You do a 40-second, 60-second video.
We're not getting the sense here. It's just the pitch deck, and if I understand, and this is a different design, is what can you flip through that is self-explanatory, that doesn't need someone in the room to describe what's on each page?
Yeah, we don't want a written business plan. Like if you send something that's like 24 pages of text, for sure we'll never even look at the deck. It's like, because
Right.
you know, but the standard 15 slide pitch deck is pretty much there, which nails down some of the assumptions you have about this business. And believe me, when we talk about how large the tech industry is now and how diverse the company is, without informing us first, that's why sending us a pitch deck, we don't have any context. And we can, of course, jump to wrong conclusions, but at least we'll tell you what those conclusions are before you get in there. Where the video has taken over is on the IPO roadshow. And for the IPO roadshow, you have to prepare a 20-minute video. You don't ever get to see these because they disappear after the roadshow is done. But that is where the institutional investors get to see these videos, which are really, really quite amazing, which codifies what your business is. But we don't, I don't like, my university ran a business plan contest with 85 universities last spring, and they had a whole bunch of judges. I volunteered to be one, and we got both videos and a pitch deck because we were not going to see these companies live ever. And it was very revealing because some people were really great at the pitch deck and then they read them as their video. And some people were great at the video. They were lively and articulate, but the codifying of the business in the short deck was pretty lame.
I developed an app, and Klein & Perkins, they asked me for a video rather than a pitch deck. They wanted to, specifically, there's a sentence like no more than a 60-second video about your product, your app. So I prepared a video.
So again, that's what Klein Perkins wants and doesn't necessarily want. That I don't think Jake necessarily wants. My company, sorry, we produce a ton of video for clients, and you get this sort of generic response from people saying, "Oh, we have to have a quote video that's like saying we have to have a web page. What is it? What?" I mean, yeah, you get to have something like that. That's good. There's more to it than just saying video. The thing is, if you can convey that information in a slide deck, in a one-page blog post, in an image, whatever is the best way to convey your story, do it that way. The
video is more emotional.
That's if you produce it emotionally, and this is a problem we get into with clients all the time when they send the questions to the interviewee beforehand, and I get this flat response from the person on camera, and I go, "Did you send the questions beforehand?" Well, that's what happens when you send the questions beforehand. You get a big 0 on camera.
Yeah. If someone asks you to send a video, I mean, this is a new ask that I haven't heard of, and 60 seconds is like a television commercial, so it's bizarre.
You get bored if it's too long.
Yeah.
Well,
It's both too long and too short.
Exactly.
So I used to work. Do any of you remember a television network called Tech TV?
Oh, yeah.
So I was with them for the first 3 years that they existed. This was our number one problem with technology. It is so non-visual.
Right.
Horrifically unvisual. We used to joke about the number of, quote, architecture shots. We go, Cisco today was in the news, get a shot of the Cisco sign, the Cisco building, blah, blah, blah. It was like, we shot so many videos like that. It drove us crazy. And then a shot of people typing on keyboards. Fascinating. So the creative becomes, what do you do with that video? How do you make this more of a story and compelling? Anyways, I'm happy to chat with you about this because this is what we do.
Well, maybe you should chat with Kleiner.
I could chat with Kleiner too. But the thing is that what I keep running into, because we're working on we're actually working on a research analysis right now on how B2B tech companies, ideally enterprise software companies, because that's the overwhelming majority of our clients, are using video. And I will tell you, and this is the big headline that I've already discovered, which is bizarrely strange, is there are 50 to 100 variables you need to control to do video properly. And the thing that kind of shocks me the most, and this is from the Fortune 500 companies are doing this, and it's really stunning, is, by the way, MuleSoft is one company I looked at, is everything these companies learn about branding, when it comes to video, they chuck it out the window. Blows my mind. Yeah. It's just gone. And it's not just from the video itself, it's from the presentation on the stage, and there's more to it than that, but that's the big headline that I'm just shocked by. So the demand for video, there's a
Huge.
extremely nuanced process involved in that. Huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know,
I
it,
think you explain my product, not my business plan, not about the.
If you're compelling enough, 60 seconds of you staring into a lens on a camera, if you're good at it, could be enough. Seriously.
So if we got any more questions, we've got time.
yeah. We'll take both of them.
So you guys talked about CEOs a bit at the start. So kind of two questions. The first is technical versus non-technical. Do you see a larger proportion as one or the other? And then the second question is, when you said, you meet companies who want you to help them find a CEO, how do you do that? Like, do you tap into your network? Do you maybe move people around from other more established companies? Like, how would you go about finding that CEO?
Well, first I'll answer the second part first. There isn't a hidden bench of CEOs in waiting. It's not that easy. And so
There's a line right off the door. You
Yeah,
just open the door and
exactly.
say, first two
So,
questions.
yeah, exactly. So we do use our networks. And remember, we're looking into...
Do you use executive search firms?
We do those too. Because first of all, we want to make sure that we don't pick the runt of the litter, that we get the pick of the litter. So we want a big litter. So we usually do hire executive search firms. But I would say that in more than 50% of the cases, even with the executive search firm searching broadly and supposedly deeper, the CEO might come out of one of the investors' networks because we know the person better. We know what's going to fit the company. We also, can see rising talent in companies we funded in the past where someone is going to make a great first-time CEO. And believe me, I think first-time CEOs are fantastic, because they really are not going by a playbook. They really want to do the job
Are
well.
there characteristics you look for first-time CEOs?
I look for just, intellectual stamina. Really, kind of the good people qualities that they actually also know how to attract excellence themselves, know how to hire and manage change, that they can work broader in the industry than just leading their little tent. So it's
Perseverance.
Perseverance, yeah. Physical stamina, besides just intellectual stamina. That all those things, and also fit. The chemistry among the team, the existing team, including the founders, has to be very, very strong. But yeah, no, it takes sometimes a long time to find that right person, and that means whoever is the founding leadership has to sort of run the tribe, until that person is found. And the first part of your question was.
Like the proportionality between technical versus non-technical.
Yeah, well,
where do you see more of one or the other?
We fund core enterprise software. So, usually our founders are pretty technical, much more technical than we are. They need to sort of, make us think about what they're saying. But I do think that most of the CEOs that, even if they've come through the, biz dev or marketing or, sales ranks, that at some point in time, they've learned how to lift the hood of the car and, do maintenance on their own. They may not have been, like me, I was a CEO, but I was not the best programmer, but I could program. But I realized early on that a lot of people could program, write software much faster, better, and, just generally, higher quality than I did. So, I assumed the leadership role in default almost. But, so they have to be able to, most of these companies we fund have a large number of engineers over time, and keeping that engineering team intact, motivated, aspiring to the future is something they have to be able to do. So they can't just talk the talk. It helps if they have, at least at one point in their career, done a little bit of the walking.
We need
We've
to.
got one more
one more question, and we'll wrap up with this. And if you have any more questions, you have a few minutes afterwards.
Sure.
She'll chat after.
Yeah, so you talk a little bit about early stage evaluation. So what is so as founders, we just go online and do all kind of research and see what the market value is saying about the industry. What is the VC's approach to, an early stage company just come to you and say, our market is going to be $30 billion. How do VC look at those kind of evaluation?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess for me, I don't care so much about the specific answer you come to or the answer we come to, as long as the number is big enough to support a large exit in the space. But what I care a lot about is how you came to your answer that you give me, because it gives me insight into your thinking. And so, like, what I don't like is someone saying, we are going to be Uber for laundry. The laundry space is a $150 billion a year space. Our market is $150 billion a year, because that's not what your market is, right? If you're doing Uber for laundry and there's X charge for that, then there's a very large portion of the US that just will never be able to afford that laundry service. So take out, I don't know, 100 billion of your 50 billion. And then there's a segment that has laundry in the house and they like to do their own, whatever the size of the segment is. I want you to walk through your thought process that got me to your market and just make me think that you've been really thoughtful about how you're building your business and thinking about who your customers ultimately are. That's what I care about.
Yeah, and I think back to another way people would say is, hey, this total laundry market is 150 billion. All we need to do is get 2% of it to have a $3 billion company. Well, that also doesn't tell me anything, So it's just we just need to just carve a little edge off this, and we're giant. Well, how do you carve the edge off? What is the edge? Where do you start carving? How much you charge per carve? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, my daughter could tell me that, the beverage industry is a $75 billion a year industry in the US, and she's going to have a lemonade stand, and all she needs is 1% of that market to build a $1 billion company.
Yeah.
It's true, but that doesn't tell us anything.
But she might get in the door if she was 7 years old and said that to you.
Yeah, I'd make a small investment, little
yeah.
nepotism.
So I just want to thank you all for a fantastic conversation. I've learnt so much tonight, and I hope everyone else has, and everyone online as well. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.